All right, welcome. I think we're good. Stream's good. So we'll review what we did day 6 real quick. Right here. It was actually a pretty good day. So we bootstrapped our React project with npx create React app, and when we use npx, we're getting the freshest possible build direct from their servers. We installed React Router to use for our front end routes. And for an example of that, when we have just a / as our path, we have the home component that's being rendered. And I believe we did a /login for our login component and a /register for our register component. And we got some good work done on our register component form. So yeah, and then this register component form in register.js is actually storing the email and password in state. And then when we submit it, let's actually test it out. So when we submit it, this handle submit function is going to run. So enter email, we can do max@yahoo2.com, password 123, and then when we click register, we get this nice, beautiful token returned to us. So that's exactly where we stopped off day 6. And now for day 7, we want to take this token that's being displayed in the console right now that was received from our backend, and we want to set it in local storage. And we also want to set it in our application state. But it would be very nice to have that user accessible everywhere. So I'm trying to think what I want to accomplish first. Let's just because I wrote it first, let's do this first, and then we'll talk about this next objective. This next objective includes some good amount of work. So let's do this one first. It's simpler. We want our front-end React client receive this token, and we want to store it in our web page so that if the user exits Chrome or even refreshes the page, it doesn't go away. It will still be there if we want to retrieve it later on. So that's our objective. So let's go back to register.js. And now instead of console.logging this token, we want to save this token in local storage. So that's our objective. And since this is the first time we're seeing this concept, let's try to look at the docs. Local storage. JavaScript should be fine. W3 is always great. Let's check out what they have to say. And this couldn't be easier, right? So, sorry about that. So we have local storage.setItem, and we have local storage.getItem. So it looks like you just need to supply a key and a value, and it'll save it by the key. And then when you want to get it, you need the key again. So just to give an example of this, we're going to go ahead and local storage.setItem. And what we want to set actually is a user, but there's actually, it's a little more complicated than just a string I want to set. I actually want to set an object with both the token because that's nice to have, right? But I also want the email, the user's email. And right now we actually don't have that available to us in this function because we're only receiving the token. So before I run this code, I actually need to tweak my backend to receive this information that I want so that I can set this whole object as the user in our local storage. So let me do that. So I'm going to comment this line because we're going to use it later. And now I want to tweak my backend. So here's our backend code. And right now I'm in the register route. So I'm going to find that in routes, users, user_router.post register. And then you can see here, we're just responding with a token. But can we also respond with an email is the question. And it looks like we can grab that email from user.email, if we look at the code right above here. So let's grab it. And now, just to see if this tweak successfully worked, let me console.log the response again. And instead of being a token, this response should be that whole it'll be the user information we need, the token and the email. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to fill out this form again, register a new user, and we'll do max3@yahoo.com, password 123. We click register, and from our backend, now that we tweaked it, we get both a token and an email, which is what we want to save on our front end. So that's looking nice. So now I'm going to uncomment this code. And I'm going to delete this comment, save this token, because we're actually saving the token and the user under this key of user. So now I have user. So token is the same, but email is going to be user.email. And the problem is this method, setItem, accepts a string as the key and a string as the value. So right now this is an object, but we have a built-in JavaScript method that we can convert it to a string. So we can do json.stringify. And I'm not sure if local storage.setItem is promise based. I think it must be, but I'm not sure. But let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. All right, we got an error. Token is not defined, line 22. Oh, so we changed this. It used to be token, but now it's user. So now we actually need user.token. And now that I'm looking at this, to simplify things, I think we can just actually have json.stringify the user object, because the user object is exactly this. It has a token property and a I think we can just do that. I'm not 100% on that, but we'll check it out. So no errors when we ran it. That's nice. And then we go to our front end, and let's try max5 at google.com. 1, 2, 3. Click register. And now we're not going to see anything happen actually. But if we switch in our console to, I think is it application? Yeah. So now in application, we see under local storage and our specific domain, we see this user with, can I make this bigger? Oh, down here, nice. So we see the email and token, exactly what we want, stored under user. And right now it's a JSON object. And this local storage obviously is unique for every site. So like if I went to Amazon.com, this key and value doesn't exist. It's just for this particular domain. So that's awesome. So now the theoretically a user could close this Chrome application, Chrome browser, and reopen it in this local storage. I don't know if technically this is a cookie or not. I'm tempted to call it a cookie, but I'm also want to be careful to not use that name if it's not technically. So we'll just say this local storage item is successfully stored. And as far as I can tell, this is the best practice of where you're supposed to store your tokens in this local storage. Okay, so returning to the README, we stored the token that we received and email from the server onto local storage. Now we want to, so that's just for if the user like closes the browser and turns off their computer, that they don't have to re-log in when they enter our site again. Some sites maybe you would want them to have to re-log in every time, but on our site we don't want that because it's not like super secure. So so that's one element, but another element is we would like the user information to be available in our state, in our application state, so it's readily available to any component that might need it. It's not super handy to have it in local storage because then we have to use this, we have to basically fetch it from local storage every time we want to use it. It's just not convenient and it's not practical. So we want to store it in state. And more than store it in state, we want to store it globally, so that's available to any component it might need. Because we think we could have 50 components and maybe one of them, like really nested, needs to know the user's email for whatever reason. So for this situation, we want to use context, which is new to React. And that's where we're going to implement now. So since it's a new concept, we're going to check out the docs for it. And it's useContext, React. And we'll just do a search for it. useContext. It's right here. So here's an example of once it's set up, how we would access it. Const value equals useContext my context. But first we have to actually create the context. And let me see if there's an example of creating the context. And give me 15 seconds. I'm going to let my dog outside. All right, so yeah, before we do that, we have to create the context. And let's see if there's an example of that. Let me search for it. And I think it's just create context. don't see a great example of it, but we're gonna do one more search, create context, React. And we'll see if this is all right, this guide. I think I remember the steps enough to start. I think I remember the steps enough to get us started. So let's start and see how it works out. So in my source directory, I'm going to create a file called context.js. And then I'm going to import React, and I'm going to import create context from React. And then I'm going to say const context equals create context. And I don't believe this needs any arguments. Oh, it takes a default value, but we're good for now. And then let's export this so this context is available to everyone. So I think this is step number 1. Why is there an error there? Const context. Is it export default? Did I just screw that up? Yeah. Okay. So I think this is step number 1. And then step number 2, go to a very high level of your application. We'll do app.js. And here we need to provide that context to everyone, because I want user to be available for everyone. So here, I think it's context.provider, I want to say. useContext. Let me go back to the React docs. But I think it's provider. I'm going to scroll real quick. Sorry about this. Okay, so nice. Here's how we created, here's how we created the context, and now we want to do something like a provider. So on our top level, we'll say, my context.provider. So we have to import in our context, which we just called context, which can be auto imported in because we already created it. And then hopefully we can say dot provider. Okay. And then let's wrap this with our left chevron and right chevron. And now we want, since we want everything in our application to be able to have this user information, we wrap everything in our context.provider. And now we have to pass it the value of what we wanted provided. What global variables do we want to create? Well, I said that I want user, right? But I don't have user information yet here. So let's actually just do a test to see how this works. Let's just say here const test equals secret message. And then let's see if we can extract this in any component we want, this secret message, by passing it into our provider. So once we have the provider set up, I think we need the context.consumer. Yeah, so we need to provide it to everyone, and then we need to let everyone consume it. So right underneath it, I'm going to do context dot, and we can see right there, it's our first choice, consumer. So now everything should be provided the value and should be able to consume it if they choose to, this secret message. So let's test that out. Let's just go to our, let's go to our home component, and actually let's not do that, or that's fine maybe. So in our home component, how do we now access it? I'm going to change this to be immediately returning. And then let's get a good example of how to, when you're in a specific component, how to extract that kind of global variable. And give me 1 second. So let's console log. Let's do props and console.log props just to get started. I'm pulling a blank right now how I consume the context in a particular, you know what, it's not props. We can see what props are available, but it's not props here. So if we go to our home route, all right, so we have an error, render is not a function. Oh, this has to be from our app because that's where we were last working. Let me see where this error is being produced. Render is not a function, type error. Render is not a function. Let me see where this error is. So if I comment out I'm pretty sure it's going to be the new code I wrote, the provider and the consumer. If I comment this out, yeah, there's no error. If I put it back in, the error is there. So let's take a look at our context.js again. Context equals create context. I'll put in a value of null originally just to be safe. Still not good. Provider context.consumer. I'm going to change this. So typically you provide things that are in the state to the context provider. So let's go and do that. Let's just do const test and set test as use state. And we wanted this to be initially secret message. And then let's pass. Oh, we did pass test. All right, what if I just put a value of an empty string? All right, I'm gonna cheat, sorry, and look at my old project because I did this before, obviously, or not obviously at all. So let me cheat and look at my old project because I'm blocked. So on this Manga client, I'm working on a project that translates manga. Let's see how I did it here. So I have a folder context, but that shouldn't matter. And then I have context.js, and I did react.createContext null. It's exactly the same thing. And then on app.js, I have a lot going on here, but I imported the context. Oh, so you need a double object, or not a double object. You need to provide, no, I don't think you do. Oh, there's no consumer. That's it. It's just context.provider. I don't need context.consumer, which makes it way easier. Let me keep that open and then we'll try. We'll get rid of context.consumer. Okay, I think we might be good. So let's try this one more time. Let's just do a value of well, we already set up state for test. Let's just do a value of test. And now the whole point of all this is that all of these components should have access to this value. So let's test that out in home. Let's go to, is it use context? And I'm going to cheat again because my brain is fried from that block. Users. So just use state. Oh no, this is app.js. So this is where everything's being set. The things I want in my global context, so to speak. And then here's where they're being set. Yeah, the values. But when I consume them, let's check out like our home component. And to consume them, I'm just saying use context. And then I'm destructuring what I want from use context. So use context context. So back in our app, here we have use context, and then we need it to bring in our context so we can auto import it, and then we grab whatever we want. But right now I only think we have user. And let's console.log user. Open the inspector, and it says undefined. Oh, because it's not user, it's test, right? User is not defined, line 6. Oh, I'm having an off day. I apologize. Okay, so finally, here's our secret message. But the really cool thing is now this variable, this piece of state is available to anyone we want. But we obviously don't want secret message or test. That's just an example. And let's get the actual information we want. But one more time, let me show you that flow. So we had to, the very first step of creating a global piece of state that we can use with useContext. We created this file, context.js. This code to create the context, you set an initial value. I don't think it really matters that much. Export it. You go into a very high level component, preferably app, and you wrap everything in this context.provider. So you bring in the context you just created and you say context.provider, and everything is now a child. And the values we pass in can be anything. We could have 100 values, or we could have 1. So the value we actually want is user and set user. And this user, and this user, we have to still grab this information that's stored in our local storage that we did in register. So for now, we can just put sample user, because this will be our default value, our initial value. And then instead of test, we want to pass in user here. And then in our home component, we want to grab user and see the user, but it's just going to be sample user right now. So right here in the console, sample user. So here's the thing with these global variables. The one thing is accessing them, right? Like we did here in our home component, we're able to see the value. But another thing you can do is change the value. So I'm going to get rid of well, I guess I can keep that code for now. That's fine. But returning to our register component, we successfully set this in local storage, our good user, and I'm sure it's still there even. If we go back to, was it memory? No, it was application. And we can see our local storage is still there with our token, our email and our token. But the next step was to set it in our state. So we actually want to do something like set user and then pass in that user object, just like that. And to do that with context, all we have to do is add in our provider the set user, because we get that for free from React when we're creating pieces of state. We set the state initially and then we can change it at any time. So yeah, so now let's actually change this back to just be null at first. So now when we save this, user is initially null, but in register, if we register a new user, it will actually set the user here, user, and then it'll be available globally. Set user is not defined, so we have to, okay, yeah, so set user we have to bring in to this specific component so that we can set the user. And to do that, we need the context again. So we need to destructure set user from the context. And was this, I think this is useContext. I think this is actually useContext, yeah. And then what context we want to use. Okay, cool, no error. So useContext, we're in a specific component and we want to consume a piece of that global state and the specific custom context that we created, context. And then what piece of the state do we want? We want the function set user. And now there's no errors in our application. So now my argument is that when we register a new user, this will be automatically set user, and then it'll be available globally. And when we consume it in home, it'll be available here. And instead of console.logging, let's just say, let's do a new, some new JSX with a, I guess just a div that says user, and then we JSON.stringify the user so we can see it visually. We can even say signed in user. So right now, perfect, null, right? No one is signed in. But let's go to our register component, and let's go to /register. And I'll get rid of well, I'll put this back to console, but right now it doesn't matter that much. Let's do max 34 at lycos.com, password 123. Register, we shouldn't see anything yet, but if we go to our /home, what happened? Oh, not register /home, we just go to our /home. Why didn't it show anything? Oh, we don't, my bad. We don't have a /home. We just have /. Signed in user still null. Shoot. Is it because you know what? I think it's because I manually, when you manually enter a path here, I think it refreshes the page. So we'll actually lose our user because we're manually refreshing the page. So after we set user in this component, it would actually be nice to set user. You know what? So we set user here for right now. Let's just console.log user just to visually see it and see if it worked. Because it should set it and then it should update it everywhere. It should update it anywhere that's asking for it. So we have to bring it in actually with user. So we should see it render once with null and then render again with a real user. So sorry, let's go to /register. max12 at yahoo.com. Oh, and we're seeing every time it's rendering, we're still seeing the user, all these nulls. So hopefully we see an actual user, and we do. We got the token and we got the email, which is the two pieces we want. And just to show you guys what I was talking about with how this manually changing this causes a refresh. If we go to / and enter, now we lose the user. Okay, but let's check in with our README. So we set user using context, and that was a big step, a lot of steps and sub-steps involved, which I probably could have written out, but we got it done. Our next step actually will be to redirect dynamically or in JavaScript code to / so that it doesn't manually cause a refresh and we don't lose our user. And we're going to do that day 8. So hopefully tomorrow. And I know we hit kind of a major block there, but I think it's good to, it's a little bit of suffering, but it's good to learn and suffer along with me. I try to obviously do the whole project one time first before I start, but you always like forget little things and run into issues. Especially I'm new to using context. Everyone is. It's kind of a new feature. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.